Chapter 3. The Gimme Ghost. Did you hear? The Phantom Renegade broke into the local museum last night, Henry exclaimed as Snow pushed my wheelchair through the door of the 24-hop mart. I furrowed my brow. Is that why the roads were blocked off? I asked as Snow positioned me at my usual spot by the sitting area near the counter. Henry nodded firmly. Yes, there's police everywhere, but they won't find him. Snow leaned back against the counter, and I narrowed my eyes at Henry's bold statement. Why? He shook his head. The Phantom Renegade only appears at night. I laughed softly. Oh, I see. So he's a vampire. Maybe he turns to a bat when the sun comes up. That would explain why he's so quick to disappear. Henry laughed along with me. Maybe, who knows? He's so cool. A conflicted look passed across my face. Well, he looks cool, I'll give him that, I said. It's like something out of a superhero film, but honestly, for me, it's just one more reason not to go out at night. He wouldn't hurt you, Henry reassured me, and I found the confidence with which he spoke curious. What makes you say that? Henry crossed his arms. The Phantom Renegade doesn't hurt anyone. He's only after one thing. Rare medals. I nodded. Exactly. If he's willing to go after such heavily guarded prized possessions, which is already a commitment and a half. Henry shook his head adamantly. No, he'd never do anything like that. Do you know him, Henry? I asked point blank, and that put him on the spot. He gulped and grinned, shaking his head with a nervous laugh. What? No way! Why would you think that? I crossed my arms. You place an awful lot of faith in a criminal, don't you think? I'm not saying the media, the police especially, are any better, but just be careful, okay? Henry smiled tenderly. I'll be fine, Sas, he reassured me gently. Sorry, I didn't mean to worry you. I sighed softly, feeling a little better. Snow kept a close eye on Henry, skeptical. Then the doorbell dinged, and into the store came Icky and his friends. I looked up in surprise and smiled upon seeing them, waving hello. Beside me, Henry breathed out a relieved sigh. Icky and Medaby came running up to me. Hey, Saskia, I'm glad to see you're okay, Icky exclaimed. I nodded, remembering what had happened the last time we'd met. Yeah, that was a bit much, I admitted. Glad to see you again, under less pressing circumstances. We didn't really get a chance to say hi last time, so here goes, Icky said, and motioned to the other children. Medaby sat down on the ground next to Snow, staring up at her. Snow ignored him for the most part, but I could tell she was happy he was there. Eureka was the first to approach. Hi, my name is Eureka, she said, and stuck out her hand. I shook it and smiled. Saskia, it's nice to meet you. What a cool camera you have. I remember you talking about an article. Are you a journalist? Eureka's face lit up and she nodded decisively. Reporter for the Riverview Review. That's our school's newspaper. That sounds wonderful, I said. I remember wanting to write for my primary school's paper, but they would only let class representative work on the project, unfortunately. Do you do only field work, or do you write articles as well? Eureka crossed her arms proudly. I do everything. I report, I capture, I write, and I edit. She grinned. Wow, I exclaimed. Impressive. That must be a lot of work. Eureka nodded. It is, but it's so much fun that it doesn't really feel like working. I smiled. Well, the Riverview Review must be blessed with such a dedicated reporter, photographer, writer, editor. Eureka giggled and put her hands on her hips. For sure. I caught the curious glance of one of the other children and smiled kindly. Hello, what's your name? I remembered him as the spiky-haired kid that had begged the others to go home when we had chased them through the night last week, and I remembered hearing his name in a hushed whisper, but I couldn't recall it exactly. He looked a little sad. He was surprised that I had seen him looking and stood up straight. I'm Spike. He stumbled over his words, and I nodded, remembering. That's right. It's nice to meet you, Spike. He nodded sheepishly. Yeah, you too? The girl stood beside him, rolled her eyes, and crossed her arms. I'm Samantha, and this is Sloane, she said in her gruff voice, nodding to the shorter kid standing on her left. With the screws. I tilted my head slightly after nodding to the both of them. The screws? I repeated, and Samantha grinned. That's all right, the notorious Screws gang. I smiled, amused. Notorious, huh? So what do you get up to? Row battles, Samantha smirked, and Snow perked up hearing that. Oh, are you any good? I asked, glancing down at my Medabot. Of course we are, Samantha exclaimed, and Icky couldn't help but laugh. Yeah, maybe you, Sam, but not... Samantha grabbed Icky by his shirt. What was that, huh? She shouted, and I flinched. Snow sprang into action, but before she could say anything, so did Henry. Enough! If you want to fight, do it outside the store, he ordered, and the kids begrudgingly let go of each other. I glanced up at Henry, a little bit surprised to see him so assertive. I hadn't seen that side of him before, but I appreciated it very much now that the kids were a little quieter. Anyway, Samantha, I spoke, and the girl turned to me. It's good to meet you. She scratched the back of her head, a little unsure as to how to answer. Yeah, good to meet you too, I guess, she said, and I smiled. So, what can I do for you kids today? Henry asked, crossing his arms and smiling. Icky and Erika shared a moment of eye contact. Actually, Henry, Erika began, but then movement outside the store's window caught my attention. A long, ridiculously pink limousine came to halt in front of the store. Icky's face lit up upon seeing it. Karen! He exclaimed and ran outside. Erika sighed dramatically and followed him. I glanced up at Henry, but he seemed just as confused as I was. Do you know what's going on? I asked Sloane, who was closest to me. He shrugged and shook his head. No, ma'am. I chuckled softly at the way he addressed me. You may call me Saskia, I said, and he nodded. Understood. It's those rich kids! Let's go check it out! Samantha said and ran out the store. Spike and Sloane following right behind. Do you know them, Medaby? Snow asked, and I turned to look at them. I'd almost forgotten Medaby was there. He had been unusually quiet. Yeah, that kid with the black hair has a Medabot named Similodon. He's almost as fast as you. He kind of fights like you too. Snow crossed her arms. Interesting. I'd very much like to meet him. I smiled. Well then let's, I said, and Snow nodded, excited. I turned to look up at Henry. Are you coming? I asked, hoping he would. If a customer comes along, you can just step back inside, right? Henry seemed a little surprised that I'd asked him to come along, blushing slightly, but he smiled soon enough. Yeah, my shift's almost over anyway, he said, and stepped out from behind the counter. As Snow rolled my wheelchair outside, Medaby and Henry following behind us, I caught a glimpse of the two new children as the pink limousine drove off. One of them had short, black hair, and a look of contempt on his face as he butted heads with Icky. The other was a ginger girl with pigtails. She observed the other kid with a sweet but concerned expression. We need your help, the girl urged. You see, Koji had his medal stolen. By the Gimme Ghost. Karen, I told you not to tell them about that! The black-haired child, apparently named Koji, pleaded as he turned to the girl. Samantha, Spike, and Sloane shared a moment of eye contact. I narrowed my eyes. How's that for your innocent thief, stealing from children? I couldn't help but mutter under my breath. Henry crossed his arms, agitated. Gimme Ghost? Give me a break. Phantom Renegade sounds way cooler. Koji shook his head, turning to face us. It wasn't him. I wouldn't be scared of that masked clown. He huffed, and Henry's body language stiffened. With that reaction, I'd almost assumed he'd taken the insult personally. Again, I couldn't help but wonder why. It happened by the forest. Similodon and I were doing some late-night training when... Koji shivered, with fear, with guilt, maybe with both, and I couldn't help but feel bad for him. When all of a sudden... Give me your medal! Give me your medal! Erika jeered. Spike jumped, and Koji's eyes widened as he spun around to face her. Exactly that! Samantha laughed. And you just handed it over, pretty boy? She mocked. Spike looked down, and Sloane nudged him with his arm in a friendly sort of gesture. Of course I didn't, Koji huffed in response to Samantha. I didn't, okay? Karen patted him on the shoulder. Koji ran away, she explained, and Koji turned red, embarrassed. I thought Similodon would follow me, he said quickly. But when I looked back, he wasn't moving. I narrowed my eyes. "I'm so sorry," I said, and he looked back at me in surprise. Maybe he hadn't been expecting compassion. Medaby crossed his arms. "We gotta help Similodon!" he exclaimed. "We can't just leave him. Let's go! Take us to where you last saw him, rich guy!" "So you'll help?" The girl with the pigtails clapped her hands, overjoyed. "Anything for you, Karen!" Icky exclaimed. Erika grinned widely. "Oh, yes! What a scoop! This'll be front-page news for sure!" "Well, guys, you ready to catch a ghost?" Samantha smirked, and Sloane nodded, serious as could be. But Spike hid behind him, almost embarrassed. "No way, boss!" Samantha turned to him and hissed. "Come on, Spike, you have to be brave!" Spike shook his head like he would never dare do such a thing, but then he remembered something. But then he seemed to remember something, and reluctantly agreed. I glanced up at Henry, concern flashing across my face. Were we in for another long night? It was already getting dark. The sunset painted the sky in warm hues. He met my glance and smiled reassuringly. "Don't worry, I'll handle this," he promised. "You can go home and rest." I narrowed my eyes and shook my head. "No shot. If you're going, I'm going." Henry looked down at the determined expression on my face and realized I would not be backing down. He scratched the back of his head, conflicted. "All right, kids, let me close up the shop and we can go," he then stated, and the children looked up at him. Henry, you know you don't have to come with us, right?" Henry shook his head, heading inside to grab his bag. "Nah, we're coming with you, whether you like it or not, as volunteer babysitters." Icky sighed. "Well, just don't blame us if you get fired." I couldn't help but giggle a little, even if I was getting a bad feeling about the whole situation, creeping up on me slowly and slightly, but I noticed it nonetheless. This is not going to be an uneventful night, is it? The whole group walked through town to get to the edge of the forest. Henry was pushing my wheelchair so Snow could walk up front with Medaby, wanting to be the first to face the danger should there be any. She fidgeted with her claws, no doubt expecting something. I too considered it. Ghost? Probably not, but who or what could be passing themselves off as a ghost? A phantom, if you would. Stealing medals? It definitely sounded familiar. I didn't dwell on it too much. From what I had heard in the news, the Phantom Renegade didn't seem to have a Medabot. With both Snow and Medaby, I figured we would be fine, even if he did show up. Snow wasn't a Medabot to run and hide, nor would she want to easily give up her medal, and neither was Medaby. Should he want them, he would not be in for an easy time. Erika's Medabot Brass and Karen's Medabot Neutronurse were there as well as Samantha's Peppercat and Sloane's Totalizer. Even if the Phantom Renegade had a Medabot, he would be hard-pressed to win against so many opponents. Regardless, I hoped Henry was right about him. I hoped he did just stick to stealing rare medals, and that he would not be adding anything worse to his criminal record. Icky seemed a little apprehensive about the whole thing, glancing around and behind him. "Everything okay?" I asked him quietly, as to not alert the others, who were locked in a heated debate about whether ghosts were able to pick up medals if they couldn't interact with the rest of the physical world. Icky looked back at me and slowed his pace until he was walking beside the wheelchair. "I just don't get why we had to come here now, that's all. It's getting dark. I just wish the Gimme Ghost would show himself so we could row battle him and go home," he confessed. "You and me both," I said, nodding in agreement. "I'm sure it'll be fine," I reassured after watching a frown take over his face. "As long as we stick together, we'll be okay." That seemed to help him feel a little more at ease. No, you've got it all wrong. They can touch objects if they want to," Erika said firmly, explaining her theory. "But they have to choose to. That explains why they can float through walls and rattle doors and creak floorboards too." "I guess that makes sense," Koji relented, crossing his arms. "But I still don't get how." As they continued to argue, the daylight faded more and more, and as we progressed towards the forest, the ominous feeling in my stomach that something was about to happen became more and more persistent as darkness fell over us. "It's pitch black," Icky shivered. "We could walk right by the Gimme Ghost and not even know it." It became apparent why whoever was pretending to be a ghost would pick this spot of all places. Away from the city, there were hardly any streetlights. They were perfectly obscured. The wind howled, and with everybody on edge, we all jumped at the sound. What was that? What was that? Icky exclaimed, a tremor in his voice. Just the wind, Erika said, trying to rationalize. As he turned to her to argue, Icky gasped and froze for a moment, and then pointed into the brush. Erika! He whimpered. Geez, do you have to sound so creeped out? Erika snapped back, her nerves getting to her. There's something behind you, Icky whined. No way, Erika protested, braving a glance over her shoulder. But I saw something, Icky insisted, and Spike hid behind Samantha, shaking like a leaf. Koji rolled his eyes, crossing his arms in agitation. Oh, please, you're letting your imagination run away with you, he huffed. Next you'll be seeing. I was about to interject when a nearby streetlight suddenly flickered on. The kid screamed, and I flinched. Upon seeing the source of the sudden flash of light, Koji shouted, afraid and very upset about it. It's just a stupid old lamppost, see? You're acting like babies. He turned on his heel and stormed off. Koji, wait! Karen called after him, but before she could pursue him, Henry ran after him. Stay with Saskia, he ordered, and Karen sighed softly and relented, her eyebrows furrowed in a worried frown. I nodded. He's right. No matter what happens, stick together, okay? I urged them, and they reluctantly agreed. It's all right, I reassured. Do you want to go back? Henry and I will get each of you home. Erika shook her head. No, we can't. We have to rescue Similidon and find the gimme ghost. Samantha nodded in agreement, much to the dismay of Spike. Exactly. We've come too far to head back now. We're going to find that ghost and teach him messing with the Screws gang was the biggest mistake of his life. Or death. Mess with you? I asked, my mind catching up right as the words left my mouth. I had seen Spike's frightened demeanour, the absence of his medabot, and the way he was whispering with Sloane and Samantha to make sure no one overheard. Samantha looked back at Spike, then to me. Spike had his medal stolen too, she said, and the spiky-haired kid sighed. I miss him, he muttered. Oh, Cyan dog. I took a deep breath as everyone tried their best to convince me we had to stay. I sighed and relented. Fine, okay, but we stay together, got it? They promised, and then Koji returned. Everyone breathed out a sigh of relief, but I froze upon realizing Henry wasn't with him. Where's Henry? I urged, and Koji turned to look over his shoulder. Huh? He was right behind me just a second ago, he exclaimed. I froze completely. Oh no. What, now he needs a babysitter? Samantha shook her head. Where did he go to? Erika stammered as she looked around. Always disappearing, Medaby muttered, and that last comment stood out to me. What? I asked sharply, a little sharper than I had meant to, but I was starting to grow more anxious. Medaby jumped, and Snow immediately made her way over to me, sensing my distress. It's kind of his thing, you know, Medaby said. He just vanishes sometimes, but he always turns up later. I furrowed my brow. Really? He's never done anything like that around me, I said. But then all the strange things he had done, like scaling a wall with extreme ease or saying something out of the ordinary, came rushing to the forefront of my mind. Before I could correct myself, though, Erika chuckled. Yeah, that's because he has the biggest crush on you. That startled me so much that I completely forgot about my fears. What? Erika laughed at my genuine surprise. Huh? You mean you can't tell? He's totally in love with you. I crossed my arms, feeling a deep sense of discomfort stir up within me. I see. Let's keep moving for now. The sooner we catch this ghost, the sooner we can all go home. Snow pushed my wheelchair forward now, and I was very thankful that the path we were on was hard enough for the chair to traverse it without much trouble. We stayed at the back of the group, Iggy and Erika up front with their medabots, then Karen with hers, followed by Sam and the Screws and theirs, and Koji was beside me. I was keeping a close eye out, my eyes locked on all the children. I was not about to let any of them out of my sight. Back when I could still walk for longer periods of time, I loved going for hikes in these woods, and I remembered the way well. Only it had been a few years since I had walked there regularly, and in the darkness, everything looked different. I contemplated how many of these perceived changes were because of the lack of light, and how much a forest could reasonably change over the amount of time it had been, and pondered if it would make much of a difference when it came to navigation. Then, Icky screamed. I started and sat up, trying to get a better look. "What's the matter, Icky?" I shouted, but the kids came running up to me, crowding around the wheelchair. "We heard a strange noise," Erika shivered. "I saw something that looked like glowing eyes." Icky followed up. "I want to go home," Spike whined. I held my hands up to hopefully calm them a little bit. "Shh, it's okay," I said, but honestly, I was starting to get a little freaked out as well. "It's okay. Just stick together, all right? It's safer that way." I was interrupted. "Where's Koji?" Karen exclaimed, frightened. I turned to look at where he had just been standing, but he wasn't there anymore. "Koji? Koji!" I shouted, and the children yelled along with me, but there was no reply. "What do we do?" Icky stammered, eyes wide with shock. I took a deep breath. "Stick together, all right? Keep breathing, stay calm. Hold hands and don't wander." The children exchanged glances, then reluctantly held each other's hands and urged their MEDABOTS to stay near. But then, everything I said was thrown out the window when a scream cut through the dead of night, followed by a rush of wind. "Koji." Everybody froze. That was Koji," Karen mumbled, shivering. I felt a wave of terror washing over me, trying to pull me under to the depths of panic. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. If only we could see the danger. "This is bad. First Henry disappears, now Koji," Erika muttered, eyes wide. Karen leaned against a tree for support, holding Neutrinos' hand. Icky stuck by the two of them. But both Sloane and Spike were hiding behind Samantha, who, though trying to remain her usual strong and confident self, was also looking spooked. "Stay close, Peppercat," she muttered, and her red bot took a step nearer to her metafighter. Then Erika, who was standing by herself, jumped. "Don't scare me like that!" she snapped. I didn't touch you," Iggy exclaimed, holding up his hands. Well, somebody did." She turned around to look, but there wasn't anyone close enough to touch her. Then Karen screamed and ran over to Erika, hugging her. "Someone touched me too!" Spike and Sloane whimpered, panicked. Then Icky started and shrieked as well, and then Spike and Samantha and Erika again, and everybody all at once. Only I wasn't feeling anything. Snow ran out from behind my chair to help, but then... "Hey, what's going on? You guys seeing what I'm seeing?" Medaby exclaimed, and indeed we were. Lights, many small lights, danced through the night, between tree branches, across the path surrounding us. Then we heard it. "Give me your medals! Give me your medals!" "Snow, get ready!" I urged, as two giant yellow lights that looked like eyes appeared in the darkness. Gimme never gets!" Medaby yelled back. I was just about done with this whole situation and ready to teach this supposed ghost a lesson, and so was Medaby, but the children screamed and scattered, too terrified to think, as they each ran away. No, stay close!" I shouted. "Where are you guys going? Come on, we gotta teach this gimme ghost some manners!" Medaby yelled, but the loud voice and a sound like rushing wind drowned our words out, and it was too late. The children were gone, followed by their Medabots. I was alone with Medaby and Snow and with the gimme ghost. I looked up at the giant yellow eyes, my protective side overtaking my fears. "Go on, Snow, use your blizzard. Let's see how supernatural this thing really is." As Snow jumped up and summoned an icy storm, Medaby launched his rockets. "I don't care if you can float through walls. I'm going to get metaphysical on him!" Remarkably, we heard panicked shuffling over the booming voice that was still crying for us to hand over our medals. The gimme ghost, or whatever it was that was pretending to be, shut off its lights and ran away. We heard panicked footsteps and unintelligible muttering, but they were gone as soon as they'd come. "What the?" I muttered, and Medaby was fuming. "Get back here, ghosty! Let me roast you like a marshmallow!" He yelled and took a step forward to pursue, but Snow grabbed his shoulder. "No, Medaby. If we get separated, we'll never find each other until morning. Stay close." Medaby paused, then nodded, finding the sense in that, and crossed his arms. "I dare say that wasn't a real ghost," he stated, and despite the terrible situation, I couldn't help but snort. "I'm inclined to agree with you," I admitted, and Snow nodded. I took a moment to breathe and gather myself. "All right, let's track this so-called ghost down, then we can gather the kids. If worst comes to worst, we'll just have to wait until daylight to find them all." Medaby and Snow both stood behind my wheelchair, pushing together so they each had a better view of what was happening in front of them. My eyes were used to the dark by now, and the crescent moon was out, though it still gave off precious little light, and I couldn't see very far. At least I remembered the paths well enough to know roughly where we were. "What about the police?" Medaby then asked, and I narrowed my eyes. I'll trust a police officer for as far as I can throw them, and I've got abysmal arm strength. I want these children safe, not in more danger than they're already in. No, if it is who I suspect it might be, we should be fine. As long as you two are with me, I think we can take him." Snow nodded, flexing her claws. "We're right here with you," she promised. "Yeah, you just do the thinking and we'll do the row battling. How's that?" Medaby offered, and I chuckled softly. "That sounds good, Bee." Then I heard another rush of wind, and this time it definitely stood out to me as odd. I looked up and caught a glimpse of a silhouette disappearing between the tree branches. A tall hat, a fluttering cape, and a glimmer of moonlight across a flat surface where his face should be. "I knew it!" I exclaimed. "It's him!" The man vanished from view immediately as my voice sounded, and I clenched my jaw, wishing I'd stayed quiet. "It's just one man, and I don't think he has a Medabot. We can do this." Snow and Medaby nodded, determination flickering up in their medals and showing through in the fire in their eyes. Then we heard screaming. "That's Erika," Snow gasped. "And Karen!" The two Medabots pushed me ahead as quickly as they could along the path. "Are we getting closer? Are we getting closer?" Medaby yelled, but then the forest fell completely silent. That sent a chill down my spine. "Good God, watch over them," I muttered. "I hope they're okay." We continued on, and then again we heard more screaming. "The screws!" Medaby exclaimed. And Icky! We have to help!" Then I realized something crucial. "Medaby, can you communicate with Icky via the Medawatch? Tell him we're coming. Ask if he knows where he is." Medaby stopped dead in his tracks and nodded. "Come in, Icky! Icky, where are you, pal?" Snow and I glanced over at each other as we waited for what seemed like an eternity. But then Medaby's face fell. He said one thing and then he was cut off," Medaby muttered, disturbed. "What was it?" I asked slowly, almost too frightened to want to hear the answer. Medaby straightened himself. "Clearing." I narrowed my eyes. I knew of one large clearing in the forest and the old abandoned shack that was stationed beside it. "I know where to go," I said, and Snow and Medaby wasted no time in getting behind the wheelchair to follow my directions. I silently thanked God that I had spent enough time walking here to map the whole place out in my mind. For the most part, anyway. Then, after what seemed like forever, we reached the clearing. The whole thing was surrounded by brambles, and the only path to reach it was much too small and sandy for the chair. "Let's leave it here. I can walk the rest of the way," I stated, and Snow helped me get up. I took a moment to breathe and allow my heart to catch up before straightening myself and narrowing my eyes. The old shack stood on the other end of the field, and its lights were on. Snow went ahead of me, and Medaby was behind me. We slowly, and as quietly as we could muster, crept up to the shack, sticking to the shadows. I suddenly understood why the master thief stuck exclusively to the nighttime. It was much easier to hide, probably even more so clad in all black, in the dark depths of night. I stole closer to the shack, extremely careful of each step I took, and without a sound, I managed to make my way over to one of the large cracks in the wall and look through them. What I saw shocked me to my core. All the children were there, tied up and gagged. Good grief, I breathed, barely audible. Snow and Medaby also had a peek and froze at the sight. But then I heard voices. Multiple voices from inside. I found another crack to look through, and soon came to the conclusion that I had been completely wrong. "Do we have them all?" a shrill voice sounded. "Yeah, only that chick in the wheelchair's left, but she won't get here. The clearing is surrounded by vegetation. No way she can get through." This voice was much gruffer. "We're still missing some medals, though," another voice said, this one more feminine. "That kid had an old KBT type, and the girl has an ice type. Did you see that blizzard attack? Almost took out Misty Ghost." I leaned a little closer to get a better look, laying eyes on 4 people in skin-tight suits with some strange antenna-looking headgear. They wore big sunglasses to disguise their appearances. A million thoughts ran through my head. What the hell is going on here? That's not the Phantom Renegade at all. Who are these people? Misty Ghost? I very slowly took a step back, and another to get a better look at the shack. I leaned around, inspecting the layout and attempting to figure out a way to get inside. I narrowed my eyes, trying to see a little better in the dark, but froze as the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I didn't know why, but something was amiss. Not a second later, I heard that same noise of rushing wind and felt a gloved hand placed over my mouth. I started violently and tensed up completely. "Shh, I'm not here to harm anyone," a deep voice whispered, smooth as silk. "Will you be quiet?" I swallowed thickly and nodded, and he removed his hand. I spun around to find myself face to face with none other than the Phantom Renegade. I had only seen vague, blurry photos of his silhouette contrasted against the crescent moon. Being so close, even in the dark, I could make out all the stitching on his hat, the glossy shine on his mask, and the black mesh the dark circles in front of his eyes were made of, the thick, sturdy material of his cape, and the small but unmistakable places where it had been mended by hand after suffering tears, as well as more details in the blink of an eye. What caught my attention the most was his sleek raven hair that fell in front of his mask in a familiar way. My heart was pounding in my chest. Snow and Medaby came speeding up to me, weapons raised. "Leave her alone!" Snow hissed, voice ice cold, barely a whisper but still clearly a threat. "Or I'll slice you to pieces!" The Phantom Renegade took a step back and raised his hands to convey he wasn't a threat. "Easy, Medabot," he said. "I'm only interested in medals. Rare ones." He chuckled, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Besides, if I wanted to hurt you, I wouldn't have announced myself. Relax, we're on the same side." I narrowed my eyes. "Are we?" I spat, agitated. I turned back to the shed, knowing there was precious little time to waste. The Phantom seemed a little surprised by my reaction and walked after me. "If you want to rescue those kids, you'll have to break into the building without them seeing you," he noted, crossing his arms. I turned around to face him and glared up at his mask. "Yeah, what do you think I'm trying to do, genius?" I snapped. He halted, and I couldn't tell if it was in frustration, offense, or confusion by his mask obscuring his expression, but I faltered immediately. I sighed, my breast shaky, and hung my head. "I'm sorry," I breathed. "I'm just really scared." He leaned a little closer. "It's all right," he reassured me, this time in a much softer and less cocky tone of voice, and I looked up at his mask, my concern for the children plastered across my face. "None of those rubberable clowns have a good head on their shoulders, and from the looks of it, you're pretty sharp. We can outwit them together. If you barge into their shack with your MEDABOTS and challenge them to a row battle, they'll follow you outside without a second thought. Then I'll slip in and free those children." I bit my lip and furrowed my brow, considering. I froze upon hearing laughter roaring from inside the shack. Medaby looked up at me and Snow at the Phantom. "How do we know we can trust you?" she hissed. "For all we know, you're just getting us to cause a distraction so you can steal those medals." I startled at the noise from inside the cabin. "I don't think we have much of a choice," I admitted begrudgingly. The Phantom Renegade put a hand on his chest and bowed to me. "You have my word, fair lady." Despite everything, I chuckled a little. "So there is honor among thieves." He chuckled as well, and I could feel his deep voice resonate. Suppose there is. I turned to the shack. Snow, Medaby, are you ready? Both Medabots nodded, and I took a deep breath. All right. Here we go. I kicked open the door to the shack with a shout, much to the terror of everyone inside. The only reason I had been able to do so was because the wood itself was one soft breeze away from vaporizing into splinters, but I didn't give anyone time to dwell on that. Row battle, you, me, right now, I shouted. If I win, you let the kids go and hand over all the medals. One of the gang members jumped up and at me, but Snow was quick to leap in front of me and point her sharp claws at him, the warning clear. The man took a breath and straightened himself. What if you lose? He grinned. We won't, I snapped back with confidence, not entirely artificial despite my fears. If you lose, we'll add you and your medals to our collection, whether you like it or not. I'll never row battle over my Medabot's soul. You'll have to pry their medals from my cold, dead hands, I growled. The man laughed maniacally, and I took a step back involuntarily at the pure cruelty in his voice. That can be arranged, he chuckled as he walked outside. Shrimp lips, gill girl, squid guts, let's go, come on, he shouted, and the others got up and followed him. Right, they exclaimed. I barely had time to get into position when all 4 of them summoned Medabots. I gasped in shock upon seeing the powerful and highly dangerous models they employed. A white sword, a Sigaru, a Gokudo, and a Gobanko. That's a little more challenging than a misty ghost, I mumbled, then straightened myself. Medaby, can you hear me from over here? Medaby stood next to Snow, readying his weapons. Yeah, though you might have to shout during the heat of battle. The smallest of the group laughed and tossed something my way. I narrowly avoided the object and managed to pick it up off the ground. I gasped upon recognizing Medaby's Medawatch. Go ahead and use it, we don't care. You'll lose anyway. I took a deep breath and fastened the Medawatch on my arm next to Snow's. Do you copy, Medaby? I asked. Loud and clear, Medaby sounded off, and I breathed out slowly. All right. Let's do this. The 4 opponents each inserted their respective medals into their Medabots. Then it's agreed! I was pleasantly surprised to see none other than Mr. Referee pop up from an old crate of all things. I was very glad that there was another adult to help. When Mr. Referee saw who I was fighting against, he tilted his head to the side in confusion. 4 against 2, that seems hardly fair, he said, but the man I had challenged scoffed and laughed. We're the Rubber Robo Gang, we don't care about your rules. Attack, White Sword! Wait, I haven't given the go-ahead, Mr. Referee exclaimed, shocked at this blatant disregarding of the rules, but I couldn't afford to pause. This was my first time row battling with 2 Medabots, but I couldn't allow my nerves or my inexperience to get to me. There was too much on the line. I knew I could always rely on Snow. It was Medaby I was concerned about. He wasn't exactly known for listening to orders, and this fight where we were heavily outnumbered would need the utmost precision. From a quick glance, I had noticed that the vast majority of these Medabots could not attack from a distance, and the early beginnings of a plan was starting to take shape in my mind. Snow, quickly, use your blizzard and freeze them all to the ground immediately, now that they're still close together, I shouted. Medaby, retreat as far as you can. Use your Seeker missiles as soon as Snow is out of the way. You got it, Medaby exclaimed and ran back, closer to me. Snow leapt up and slashed her claws, forming a massive blizzard from the wind that gathered between them and directing it at the Medabots below her. I had never seen her make one that big, but I could feel her determination resonate inside her metal even from there, so I wasn't surprised. Ha! Take that! She yelled, at the peak of her jump. Great work, Snow! I shouted. Get an attack in and fall back! This was one of our usual maneuvers, and neither Snow nor I had to think too much about it. Medaby, I want you to fire your rockets at Sigaru's arm parts. As far as I can tell, those are the only ranged weapons they have. Medaby nodded, and as soon as Snow came down, attacked and jumped back, he fired his missiles and took out both Sigaru's arms. Now that we had bought a little time, I was able to catch my breath and figure out a strategy. The Rubber Robos watched with their jaws practically on the floor. White Sword, use your sword to break the ice! The man who was presumably their leader cried out. Yeah, use your bat! Yelled Squid Guts to his Gobanko. Keep freezing, don't let them get out! I ordered, and Snow moved in again, summoning another blizzard to strengthen the ice that the other bots were weakening with their blows. "Take out as many arm parts as you can," I shouted. "Both of you. Medaby, the ones on the right. Snow, the ones on the left." I held my breath as I watched Snow slash and stab and Medaby fire missile after missile. The opposing Medabots seemed helpless. Almost too helpless for such combat-focused builds. Even with the scattered instructions they were given, they were supposedly the kind of Medabots that should be able to put up a fight no matter what. It was hard to tell between all the blows Snow and Medaby were landing, but they seemed confused almost, or reluctant even. I couldn't afford to dwell on it. "Grab her now!" Shrimplips shrieked, and Gokudo extended his arm parts much farther than I had anticipated they could go, grabbing hold of Snow and forcing her to the ground, in range of Whitesword and Kobanko to stab at her. "Medaby!" I gasped in shock. "Help her! Move in! Shoot and fire!" Medaby didn't need to be told twice, running across the battlefield with his shout. He fired missiles and raised his arms to shoot, freeing Snow, but not before she sustained quite a bit of damage. Get out of their range, both of you! Snow, stand by! Freeze when necessary! Medaby, keep blasting at those arm parts!" Sea-Slug, we're losing," Gilgil said, turning to their leader. "Well, it's your fault!" he snapped back immediately. "You idiots need to control those stupid Medabots better!" Gilgil crossed her arms. "What? Can't you see? They're not listening! Whose idea was it to steal these useless clunkers anyway? Could you remind me?" Sea-Slug growled and pushed her. She lost her balance and fell over, on top of Shrimplips, who cried out, "Hey, what the hell?" "Now!" I shouted. "They're distracted! Go all out! Finish it! Double down!" We exploited their vital mistake and took out the 4 Medabots one after the other. They each ejected their medals unceremoniously. "The winners are Snow and Medaby!" Mr. Referee declared with a grin, and I breathed out a sigh of relief. "Ha! We did it, Snow!" Medaby shouted, and Snow nodded, though she looked a lot worse for wear than Medaby. "No!" Sea-Slug screeched, hardly able to believe they had lost. "Rubber-robos, get her, now!" he ordered, but a bone-chilling laugh echoed across the forest and made everyone freeze. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," the Phantom Renegade warned. I breathed out a sigh of relief when the children ran out the building, each unharmed. "Saskia!" they shouted. "We're okay!" Ikki ran over to Medaby and almost tackled him. I took off Medaby's Medawatch and tossed it over to Ikki, who grinned. "Thanks!" Karen pointed up to the roof, and I followed her gaze, seeing the Phantom Renegade standing on top of the chimney. "That masked man saved us!" Samantha crossed her arms. "Yeah, and then he took all those stolen medals!" I furrowed my brow. It would be a lot harder to get them back from someone as competent. "What did you say?" the Rubber-Robo exclaimed, shocked. I looked a little closer, and noticed the Phantom Renegade was indeed carrying a large sack. He flicked a medal like he was tossing a coin and grabbed it. "Thanks for the medals," he chuckled. "It's been a blast." He set off a smoke bomb and disappeared. Despite everything, I couldn't deny that he had a charismatic charm about him. "Stop! Thief!" the Rubber-Robo shouted, which everyone found rather ironic. "Who are you calling a thief, thief?" Iggy shouted. "We're not leaving without a medal!" Sea-Slug snapped. We're taking yours, Mr. Ghost!" The wide yellow eyes of the Gimme Ghost appeared, and the children froze, but as the Medabot floated into the light that cascaded from the shed, it appeared to us as a completely normal Medabot. I crossed my arms. "As expected," I breathed out, and that voice was most certainly a recording. Erika nodded. "Yeah, it was all fake. They have all the equipment in a shed. They picked us off one by one and tied us up." I frowned harshly and took a step closer to the children. "Are you all right?" I asked softly. Some of them, mainly Spike, appeared on the brink of tears. "We'll be fine. We just want our medals back," Samantha growled. I nodded, wondering where the Phantom Renegade could have run off to, and if we would ever be able to catch him. I contemplated if there was any way to contact him, and perhaps make a deal with him, since he had said he was only looking for rare medals. "Let's do it, Ikki!" Medaby snapped me out of my thoughts. "I want to teach this ghost a lesson!" Ikki grinned. "Yeah, let's do it!" "Then it's agreed!" Mr. Referee declared, eyeing the Rubber-Robo sharply to make sure they let him finish his speech first. Meta fighters ready? Medabots, row battle! Almost immediately, Misty Ghost turned on his heel and disappeared into the woods. Hey, where are you going? Get back here! Medaby shouted and ran after his opponent. No, stop! I shouted, but he wouldn't listen. Icky, it's most certainly a trap, I said, turning to the child, but he just laughed. Misty Ghost has almost no attack ability at all. All he does is cry boo. When Medaby's through with him, he'll be crying boo-hoo. I frowned, knowing better than to underestimate opponents like that, but supposing that if worst came to worst, Snow and I would be able to handle the Misty Ghost. Whoa, what's going on? Medaby then shouted from the woods. I strained to look, but couldn't see what was happening. Why are there so many of them? Obviously you haven't heard, Seaslug bluffed. Misty Ghost has the ability to multiply! I scoffed, knowing for certain that couldn't possibly be true. And then I remembered the dancing lights that had appeared when we'd been first confronted by the Gimme Ghost. When one of the Misty Ghosts moved a little beyond the tree line, the sight of it confirmed my theory. It's just a trick. It's a trick. Just a projection. You need to find the real one. Icky nodded. Yeah, I figured. Misty Ghost doesn't have that kind of power. All right, Medaby, if he's multiplying, you gotta start subtracting. Shoot them. Whichever one you can hit is the real Misty Ghost. I glanced over at the rubber elbows as Medaby shot his way through all the fake ghosts and identified the real Misty Ghost without much trouble. They looked less and less confident and glanced at each other to figure out what to do next. Then, I spotted something else up high in the tree behind the robos. Snow, I whispered, and she realized the same thing as I did. She stole away from the group and made her way around the clearing, quiet as a mouse. Cute trick, Medaby chuckled. But you can't hide from Medaby! How do you like this? The KBT type charged and punched Misty Ghost so hard that he fell over and ejected his medal instantly. And the winner is Medaby! Mr. Referee declared happily. It takes more than a ghost to spook this Medabot, Medaby stated confidently, and Icky hugged him. We did it, Medaby, we won! We'll get you next time! Seaslug grunted, and then, before we could do anything, all four of them ran off, taking only their medals. They didn't even bother looking after their still frozen Medabots, probably presuming they'd be able to summon them again later. As soon as they were out of sight, I cried out to Snow. Now! Snow appeared on the other side of the clearing and jumped up high, slashing at something in a tree. What? Oh no! I grinned, recognizing the voice of the Phantom Renegade and the unmistakable sound of a flood of medals falling on the ground. Snow jumped down and stood guard over them, daring the Phantom to try her. Oh, what's the use? He growled in defeat and leapt away across the tree branches. I narrowed my eyes and turned to Mr. Referee. This was far from over. Ref, I started, could you please take each of these children home safely? Icky and Medaby paused their celebration. Wait, you're not coming with us? Icky asked, and the rest of the children turned to me in dismay. I nodded. I'm going to look for Henry, I explained, and they each gasped upon realizing their friendly neighborhood store clerk was still missing. But it's far too late and far too dangerous for you to be out here. Can I trust you to go home? They each shared glances, then Karen nodded. Yes, we'll take the medals and make sure they get back to their rightful owners. I smiled, grateful. Thank you. Each of your medals should be in that pile somewhere too. That was enough for all the children to rush over and search through all the medals, trying to find their friends. I breathed out, nodded to Mr. Referee after he'd reassured me he'd take care of everything, and walked over to Snow. She and I set off deeper into the forest, going the direction we had seen the Phantom Renegade disappearing into. I took a deep breath, already feeling my body protesting, but I forcibly ignored the pain and exhaustion. I worried I would never see Henry again if I didn't track him down right then and there. Snow and I traversed the forest in silence, and now that all the danger had gone, I could appreciate the stillness, the quiet of night. For a moment I wondered if we should have taken the wheelchair, or if we ought to go home regardless, pondering how much farther I could go now that the adrenaline was quickly leaving me, when I heard rustling above me. I halted immediately, on high alert. Of course, it was the Phantom. What are you doing? He called down to me from atop of his tree branch. Ghost hunting, I replied with a grin, growing more certain about the outrageous idea that had planted itself inside my mind. "Go home," he demanded, but I shook my head. "No shot," I retorted, and he sighed. "I figured you'd say something like that. No matter, I can't let you do this. Give it up. This is fruitless." I narrowed my eyes. "We'll see about that." "Yes, we will," he said, then sounded his iconic laugh as he dashed forward across the treetops and disappeared from view. "He's not going anywhere," I whispered to Snow as we continued to walk in the direction that we had run off into. Snow, so deeply connected to me as she was, had also guessed what I was thinking. "I hope you're right," she told me, but I was certain this time. "It all makes sense, Snow. Once you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth." Snow chuckled softly as I quoted my favorite detective. "I suppose so. I just don't want you to push yourself so hard." My expression hardened as I forced my body onwards. "I don't care," I muttered, even though I certainly did, and secretly wished for my wheelchair. A sense of great shame washed over me at the realization of what I was doing, forcing myself on and on beyond my limits, but still, this was more important than my health. If I stopped now and never saw Henry again, that would feel way worse than lying in bed with extreme pain and exhaustion for the next week. So on I trudged. We reached the edge of the forest and found ourselves on a broad bridge. I bit my lip as I noticed the sun coming up. "Good grief, we've been up a while," I breathed to Snow. But then we both recognized the iconic silhouette of the Phantom Renegade walking down the crossing. Maybe he was planning on losing us in a city, or maybe he was guiding me somewhere that help would be able to reach me easier should I end up collapsing. Maybe it was both. Neither I was willing to accept. "Nearly there, Snow. Nearly," I muttered and increased my stride, almost running up to him. I felt my heart thumping in my throat and tried my best to breathe as deeply as I could. "You don't know when to quit, do you, sweetheart?" The Phantom Renegade turned around to face me. I scoffed. "Excuse me? What? Am I supposed to just turn a blind eye?" He laughed softly and turned to look out across the water, watching the early morning sun rays reflect off the river. "No, you couldn't. Like I said, you're pretty sharp. I've got to admit I'm impressed. Nobody else has figured it out before." I huffed. "It was trivial, sweetheart," I said, hoping to keep him engaged enough to where he wouldn't run away again, as I slowly made my way over to where he was standing. The sunrise reflected in his mask. "You've always been a terrible liar," I breathed out, my voice trembling along with the rest of my body. "You'll surely be discovered if you keep this up." He scoffed lightly, and I could hear him smile as he spoke his next words. "Perhaps, though I've been at this for a while, and I've yet to be caught once." "But one once is enough," I retorted, finally reaching him. "Please, you don't have to hide from me. Just let me help you. Don't go." He turned to me in surprise as I begged him to stay. Snow kept her distance, just watching out for us. The tears brimming in my eyes fell down as I blinked, glittering in the early sunlight. "Please," I breathed, my voice unsteady. "Saskia." He whispered my name and reached out to me, very gently brushing the tears off my face. "I don't want to put you in danger," he breathed out, taking another step closer. "And I don't want you to be alone," I replied and shivered. My body was at its limit, and my legs threatened to give out from under me. "No, not yet, not yet! I have to convince him!" "Don't disappear," I begged quietly, my voice laced with emotion. "Don't break my heart like that, please." I could only guess to the expression underneath the mask, but when his voice quivered as well, I could imagine it at least a little bit. I didn't know you cared that deeply." I frowned. "Of course I do." He drew in a shaky breath and nodded. "No, you're right. Of course you do." He sighed. My body couldn't take any more, and I collapsed, but he was already standing close enough to catch me. I rested my cheek against his chest, and he held me, not too tight, just enough to keep me steady. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Please," I muttered, clutching his cape with what little strength I had left. "Don't leave me." "I won't," he promised softly, and I breathed out in relief, my muscles relaxing. I could feel my body shutting down. Henry. He sighed softly and slid his mask off. I was right. The last thing I remember hearing was a tender "I've got you," and the sound of Snow's familiar footsteps.